Hi, this is Linda Aman, Aman Arts. Welcome to my world. Tonight, this is Art Talk 2024, Part 3 of Creating New Inspiration in 2024 to help you learn to fuel your creativity. So, we're going to go over to the share screen and start our talk. Thank you for everybody for coming. I would certainly not like being here all by myself. So, thank you for coming. And Marcia, would you raise your hand and tell me that that you can see the slide? Okay, thank you. All right, let me do this here. Okay, so there's my reminder to record. If the Zoom meeting freezes up, which it does once in a while, just hang out there. I can usually return if you just hang there. It hasn't been doing it lately, but it has in the past. So creating new inspiration, it's taken me years to discover things that I want to share with you that are motivations that I have found it helps a lot of people. I have a master's art group. I have 3 of them on Zoom that we go over a lot of things, and they've used a lot of these suggestions with a lot of success, and it's been exciting. I like to keep fresh in my art, and I think there's some things that you can learn from this to help you as well. So, as it says, sit back, relax. I would say if I happen to say something profound, write it down because that might be a good idea because I don't always say profound things. So, if I do one, you better write it down. All right, so these are the 10 points that we've been going over. This is our third one. So we've gone over the topics of what I love, how you would research, repurpose, reinvent old or failed paintings, working in a series, continuing education, play and explore, setting studio hours. Tonight we're going to go over the next 3. So this is a quick review of just a couple things. This is a reinvent, repurpose. This was what the painting was, and I changed it to this. This is what the painting was, and I updated to this. And this one sold. It had been in the studio, around to everybody, and it was really interesting because the person that had been around it came in. She goes, "Oh, there's a new painting here." And I said, "Well, kind of." And she bought it. And I told her that actually it had been there a while, that it had been changed. This is the series. This is where it's the series of tulips that I went from tulips that are accurate or more representational to other ways. So that was really fun to do. And then this would be playing and exploring. So this is where I had a lot of fun with the mixing of different ideas and just playing. And this is one of my favorites, and it's on a cradle board, and the sides of it have these little circles and lines all kind of going over the edge. So it's one that's fun. So that's kind of a review of what we talked about before. So this is tonight. We went through these. You saw just a couple little snippets of what are in those. If you find you want to be seeing the ones that we've had in the past, they're on my subscription. And right now there's just the first one. I haven't edited the second, and then we'll edit tonight's. So we tonight are talking about how to use your art supplies. On the other one that I wrote out, I said waste your art supplies, and people went crazy because they didn't understand I was telling them how to use them well and not waste them. So anyway, we're calling it use your art supplies. You're going to use them strategically. You're going to use good paper, and supplies is my suggestion. Then we're going to talk about compositions, styles and directions, and then gratitude and thankfulness. And we're just going to run through these. Each one of these topics could be a full series, a full lesson. We're just kind of coming with a little bit of them. So using your supplies, I think it's really important that when you have your supplies, you can try to use your best supplies that you can afford. I find I've taught over 3,000 adults, and I quit counting after that, different adults. And I have found over the years the people that progress more quickly are those who are using good supplies and good paper, good paints, and they are using them strategically and thoughtfully but they aren't practicing on bad stuff. Now, there are a few exceptions. I have an artist that does fabulous on paper that's not fabulous, but out of 3,000 people, I would say that's more rare. I kind of put it to, if you're going to make a recipe and it's going to be chocolate chip cookies, is always my example because I like them. If you use the very cheap chocolate chips, it is not the end result of good chocolate chips. And I can tell the difference. So I think that as a judge, as I've been a couple times, or when I'm critiquing work, I feel that the paint and the papers are very important in the way that you have the outcome. So I would say that when you can, you want to use the very best of things, and you'll start building up your supplies. And then over the years, you'll be able to use more and more of the what I call the good stuff. Don't scrimp on practice. Practice, practice, practice. So if you're a watercolorist and you're using a full sheet of paper, maybe you cut it down into eighths, and you try things on front and back, and you play and you experiment, and then you go bigger. But I would say your practice, if you practice on poor paper, you're not going to know how that paint and that paper, how they react on a different paper. You're re-educating yourself every time. So I feel that's important. Use good supplies. Build your supplies up. It's an investment in your education. If you're in a college class and you go to a math class, you're not going to get away with buying a math book anywhere you want. You get the math book they tell you, and it's going to cost you a lot, and that's part of the investment. So your materials, I feel, is part of your investment. Uh, and your investment is of time, resources, and it is an expense, but that will give you better or best outcomes. And I'm pretty strategically thoughtful to really do that with supplies, and I want people to know that. So I'm just giving a couple little thoughts tonight on maybe how to stretch your supplies. Number one, you can see here on the edge of my table, you see some blue tape, and I was using it to tape some areas on my watercolor paper so that I would have it on both sides. And then when I put it on both sides down really tight and I put the color between, I could pull them up and have this stenciled or perfect line on both sides of a shape. But I reuse it. If it's still got it sticky and it's still going to work, I reuse it. So it sits on the end of my table, or I put it on a surface I can take it on and off, because that's an expense that why would I waste something that I can continue to reuse? Then I use for my palettes on watercolor, I use my regular palette that I would have all my paints in. But if I'm doing acrylic or mixed media, I use the lids of all the containers that we throw away, yogurt and cottage cheese and all those. And my water containers are those same containers. I just put them through the dishwasher, and then I've got them to use, and they're disposable, but they've got a second use. So they've been recycled and being used again. Then I've got these little things. This is a small cap to when I went to um, Wendy's and I got a little smoothie thing, and it was the lid. I went, oh, that lid is just so cool. Its shape is just perfect. So that shape, I will stamp with it. I will draw around it. These, if you go to any of the fancy desserts at a party, they'll use these little disposable, tall, square, long dessert cups. They are fabulous, top and bottom, for stamping, drawing around, all those things. I have these two big boxes of reusable items that if you looked at that box, you might mistake it as a box of garbage, which it's hard for me to even think that people would think that, but it's something that I use over and over. And if you don't know my sense of humor by now, I'm sorry. It's an unusual one. Here is where I'm showing you. I have a M-gram paint of acrylic, and I lend out my paint when I teach a big workshop for people to use it. Something I have found is that people put the lid back on and don't get it on properly. And when I'm done with the workshop, I would lose a lot of tubes of paint if I didn't go back and check them on. So what I do is I keep any caps that are, when I've used the paint, I keep the old caps as an extra. I have a couple tools here. This is a knitting needle, and this is just a sharp little tool that when I'm putting this away, I will take the lid off, clean it out if it's got any dry stuff. I clean the threads out, and then I put a little Vaseline on the threads, put the lid back on, and it will be easy to get on and off. And it's just a little bit of Vaseline, it doesn't hurt anything. And what happens is I won't have these tubes dry up and be gone. That would be the same as your watercolor, especially granulating paints. They will dry up and you won't have them tight with the lid if you're not thoughtful. So, and this is a nutcracker. A lot of people use pliers to open up your tubes that are stuck. Mine don't stick much because I put that Vaseline on. These are just little tips, but the nutcracker works the best. And because of its shape, it just hangs right over the edge of my box I'm pulling my paints out of. This right here is another way to save your paints. And I would say that that is one of the larger expenses I see people waste is paint. So these are little jewelry containers, and you can buy them at Hobby Lobby, um, Craft Warehouse, Michael's, places like that in the jewelry section. And they have a little lid, and you can squirt your paint, your watercolor paints in there, and you can label the top and the bottom. You kind of want to do that. Then you can put any of your extra paints in there, squeeze, get the lid down. If you have a granulating paint, if you're not aware of what that is, no worries, we'll cover that sometime. It means that a granulating paint, especially from Daniel Smith, they're really good paints, but because the granulated paints are actually a rock in a tube, it will dry up. So what I suggest to people is when you get a brand new tube, split it out between 4 of these containers, label the top and bottom, and then be sure that you um, have the label. But then if it dries up in a container you can get in and out of, and the paint is good. Because when it dries, it's still good, but it's hard to get out of the tube if it's dried up in the tube. You can split with a knife and open it, but this is a better way to go. So the other thing about this is you don't waste paint, because you could take a few of these on a trip, just what you're painting with, or take to another studio or at a friend's house, and you'll have the opportunity of using the paints that you have. So anyway, those are thoughts. This right here is an example of a couple of paintings that I did from when I was doing watercolor. And then some of this has mixed media in it. In fact, you'll see some little cute little brads, tiny little brads that were in my mom's things that I have. When I have paint left on my brush with either watercolor isn't as wasteful, but if you have some paint of acrylic on your brush and you wipe it all out, or you take and it goes down the sink, that is a waste. Instead, I have what is called a beginner's board. Some people call it a slop board or something else. And I'll have a piece of paper or a board or something that whatever is left in my brush, I just wipe it out. And now I have a piece of paper, a canvas or something that it's no longer white. It's no scary thing anymore because there's stuff on it. I've ruined it. And I put all that on it. And pretty soon I go over and I can do a painting that has paint already down on it that is like free. And it is also a start of a painting. So you might consider that. This is one of my favorites that I did with scrap paper, a little tiny scrap paper. I had done some testing on, same here. I just had some testing areas of little tiny scraps. I'll unshare here for a minute. I'll show you the size of this little one. There's something about this. I love this painting. There's a lot of reflection here, but there's just something about knowing that I used leftover stuff. I did creative things with the little swatches of color I put down. And this has been kind of hiding because I don't want to sell it yet. Offer me a big price and we'll talk. So anyway, that's kind of some of the thing that I I make a difference with by having that. The other thing, just for a little tip, when you are with your acrylic brush and you take your extra paint and you go, and now we have beautiful things of paint on here, then please, oh please, in my world, do not go don't go over to the sink and start washing out or washing in a container. That means you are putting plastic down into our water system. Instead, you would do this. I'm kind of going to another world, but hold on. Instead, with your acrylic brush, when it's all gooey and you've already got it off onto your prepared board for another day, take a paper towel and squeeze out the extra, get it all out. It will dry in your paper towel. It gets thrown away as a plastic because it dried here. It's not going into our water source. And then your brush is almost clean. It's so almost clean that you'd be surprised. There's just, when you're going to sit out and do the soap on it, you will not even think that you painted. So that's just a tip to be thoughtful of our water supplies, because I paint a lot and I want to consider that. So these are fun for me because they became interesting beginnings. This one was a demo. I should be coming over. All right, I think you can see that now. This one I just put on watercolor. I did a background first. You can see I just took some mixed colors, put them down, and then I came over and made flowers out of what was down on the paper. So that's an example of how you would do, what do I have left in my brush? I see paper over there, or I see a canvas over there if it's acrylic, or if you're doing mixed media. And it's another way to stretch your supplies. I figure every single time that you stretch your supplies is allowing you to have good supplies. So there you go. And I'm sticking with it. All right. So in just a little thing here, if you want to get all these art talks and 60 plus 50 other lessons and then all the art talks, this is the subscription. That's my homepage of my website. You can always call and find out about it, but we have a lot of people that are enjoying that. When you become a subscriber, it's $20 a month. I get a portion of that, and you have all of those lessons open to you all the time until you would unsubscribe. So it's a huge amount of material. All right, the next thing we're going to go through is compositions or styles. I think I've worked through most of the compositions of designs through the years. I choose every year one or two compositions in design that I'm going to concentrate on. And as I've gone along through the years, I've decided to take more challenging ones. So I've had cruciform, and we're going to show some of these. I've had cruciform in my challenge pieces for a couple years, and now it's one of my favorites. Had I not gone off and into it, I wouldn't have been so excited about what I've learned from that. Checkerboard is a little different, but I just got into a show recently with a checkerboard design, and I thought, well, okay, it's good. I tried a different forward with challenges and new designs. I never copy an artist's style, but I reinvent my own work, and I'll get ideas from my research that we talked about in part 2, I think it was, research of what I get. I'll get ideas from people, but I will never have it recognizable to the source. If your artwork is recognizable to someone's work, that's an infringement of their copyright. Not that you changed it, not that you changed it 75, you changed it 10%, 20. It is if it's recognizable to the source. That's the way the law would interpret. So that's just a little side thing too. All right, compositions. These right here, you can get a clean copy. I just took mine today. Let me come over here and show you how I have them. These, I know them, but every once in a while, I just kind of pull my sheets out. These are laminated, so they're actually kind of shiny on the picture I took today. But they're on a little ring that is actually hung on the wall. And I just keep them like this. I also keep my elements and principles of design list, and they just hang on a hook on the wall. I have one here, and I have one in my studio I rent. If you want to go on my website and look under the last menu bar where it says workshop descriptions, You can download and print any of those I just showed you, as well as a poster and as well as handouts. So they're free to you to do that. But I wanted to show you how I hang them up. So mine are not as crisp and beautiful as yours will be if you didn't take a picture of them laminated and used. So there are a lot of compositions. This is a 1/3, 2/3 both ways. This is if you take those and bring the axis of them together, you get a very sweet spot. There, I'm not going to go over all these tonight, but we will show a horizontal, verticals. You've got the pyramid or the triangle. You've got equal and unequal. Down here is checkerboard. I found that to be quite interesting. This is cruciform, which I've been doing a lot. Cruciform means that it will go off onto four sides of the substrate, the canvas, the board, the paper. So if you were doing a cruciform, you could have two of these off one side and then one off here, one here, and nothing on the other side. It doesn't have to hit all four sides. It just has to hit four pieces to the sides. And if someone has a question, we'll come back to that. And then this one are kind of letters. It's L, Y, T. Some of these, as you see, an X is really the same as a cruciform. This kind of a O, boxy O would be a frame within a frame. But sometimes if you have a little different way of talking about them, they can help you understand it more, remember it more. This one right here, I did when I was in residence in Yellowstone National Park, and it is a linear horizontal. And I like the way that it just moves across and it kind of comes down diagonally and just kind of keeps you floating through. This is one that's pretty interesting because I found that I sell prints of it and I tell them I'll sign it later because this one looks really good this way or it totally upside down. So they have to tell me if they want A or B when they order the print from me. But this one is just a good example of the horizontal linear line design. This is a cruciform. This is one that I did quite a while back. I sold it over COVID. I found out that I sold a lot of paintings over COVID. Most of them were abstracts, which something I've just been doing abstracts the last maybe 2, 3 years. I did more realism and now I kind of do both. But I found out almost all of the ones that sold during COVID were for the background of Zoom meetings and they wanted something unusual. So they would buy these pieces, put it behind them when they would do Zoom meetings. So this one sold for that. Now I want you to look at this and the complexity, there's quite a lot of complexity there, but this is a newer one. And you can see I've varied that same cruciform in quite a different way with more mixed media. I like them both, but I think this one is more complex. These two, I just sold this one recently. This one comes across and then there's just a hint of it coming out. So it could almost be a T design instead, but it does hit a number of sides. So I think I felt it was a lot like a cruciform. This one is a cruciform. It comes through here and comes down here, and it makes a very distinct pattern of going. So those are, we're not going to talk about composition a lot, but by my making myself do new compositions each year, picking up another one and keeping along with the ones I now am very familiar with, I can just one day say, I think I'm going to do a checkerboard. Or I think I'm going to do a horizontal banding. I'll go through those different ones and it will inspire me to do a different idea. So as I come back up here, the other thing we said besides it being uh, was design, thinking of different design, thinking of different styles. My style has changed. Some of you have been with me 20 years now. Carol, I think you've been with me 21, I think. So I've had some of you that have been with me 20, 21 years, which is just a delight. Years, my work and everyone else's work has changed and it has moved into different ways. And I love that. And I am now to the place after this many years that I'm really okay if I make a really bad painting because it allows me to do anything I want with it and it's now not as important to me. And then it gets good again. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to ruin it. And pretty soon you've got a painting that was like a sad one, and now it's going into a show for a competition. So I say that because I had all realism, and a lot of you 20 years ago only knew me as the florist that was now making floral paintings. And now you can see some of the things that I'm doing are very different, and yet I still have the basic style that if you looked and you saw the things I love, which we talked about the first time in Art Talk 1, if you looked at the things I love, you could see a Linda Aman in my former work and in my work now, because there is a kind of a signature of who I am through those years that has changed, but there's still me in there because it's still the things I love. So when I'm talking about maybe changing your composition, maybe trying another color palette, maybe going for something very bold that you haven't tried, remember it's still you, and you can still put those things in that you love, like we talked about the first week. So the thing is, because I want to come up on that half hour that then we can talk, gratitude and thankfulness. This I am finding is much bigger than I understood it to be. I've always been thankful and grateful, but I'm finding that if I can, like the joke at the first, that I go, oh, you guys stop it. You're doing so good. And this is me over here doing this. No, I'm understanding this. I'm always thankful for my personal talent that I've been given. I'm always going to find a plethora of artists better than myself. Can be grateful and thankful for what I can do. And I bet if I was over by, in fact, let me just come over here. Does anybody ever compare themselves to somebody else and go, man, they are so much better than me? Nobody does that. Oh, a few of you. And that can be discouraging. And I've decided instead to celebrate with them who they are. And that's why I'm doing these art talks, is I want you to get better and better, and I'm going to work at that. And we can still feel that we are gifted with what we are. So give your talents and your paintings the opportunity to be, um, you're thankful for them. And then you just keep working. The other thing is, I'm finding that when you give your art away or you have it out there for view, that's important. So give of your talents, painting small gifts. I'll show a couple examples. Donating for fundraisers. If you're going to donate for a fundraiser, number one, only do the ones that you feel passionate about. You do not have to give to every person, every organization that comes to you. And I have a lot that come to me, and I every year have a plan of where I'm going to put my paintings as a gifting or donations or fundraising, whatever you want to say. The last 2 years, my husband is the college president of College of Eastern Idaho, and one year I gave 50 paintings that were auctioned off, and all the money went to the college for scholarships. Last year, I did 50 paintings, and they were all auctioned off, and it was for a new building that they're trying to get. I'm passionate about education. It fit well for me, and you can't write them off like you think. You can only write off the actual materials, which would be the board, the paint, and but anyway, the idea is that you have given to where you want to give. And just as a side note, if you are going to give a painting to an organization, have a start price, or it could sell for under the frame cost. So I would always say, yes, I would love to donate this painting, but if it doesn't go for at least $250, which is lower than I would usually do on that painting, I'd say if it doesn't go for 250, I want it back. And they go, well, what? Well, what if somebody doesn't go that high? And I said, they should not be there to buy a cheap painting. They should be there to support your organization. So therefore, have a minimum price and it'll work, because you don't need to have the organization that you love not get some money in. So there's a little side piece too. I love to teach, so I just keep telling you these little thoughts. So here are a couple little thoughts of how I give paintings. I had a lot of those that were in the donation. And then these are things I have a Christmas gifts class, and then we're gonna have a Valentine's gift class coming up. These are bookmarks that you watercolor and little magnets, all kinds of things. And I laminate them and I use those for gifts. And I'm really amazed how that will bless somebody. Maybe you know somebody that has a birthday or they have a loss or you want to encourage them. It's like all over the board that you can do that. These little magnets that are original paintings inside them. When you give somebody your art that is personally rendered by you, you are giving part of yourself to that person. This is just a snapshot of the kinds of things that I do so that you can be aware of. I do in-person classes. If you feel that you're at a level where you want to really push forward to that higher level, I have master classes online. Those would be something that you'd have to ask me. I'd have to see where you're at in your art to kind of have that. I have the online subscription we talked about. I have consultations, private Zoom workshops, the website's there, and then the free art talks is new. So I do a thing or two. And the reason I tell you I do that is not only for you to kind of find me, but to tell you I do all that. And at the end of a year, I usually have 80 to 90 paintings. So when you say you have no time for painting, I'm not going to buy it. I think you do. Okay, the next one, just to give you heads up, is going to be February 7th. You are on my list now. So when you're on my list, what that means is you're going to be on that list, and the day before the Art Talk is coming, you will get an email with the link. You don't have to keep re-signing up. This is an Art Talk list. So if you're on my list, there's my 3,000 people out there. They're not on here. This is if you know somebody that would like to be on this and would like to participate, they email me their name and email, then I put them over on the list. And they might be somebody that just appreciates art. It's just going to be something that I want to have people be involved in. So if you want to unmute, I would like to hear what you feel you gained by this art talk tonight. What was interesting to you? What reminded you of something? What would you want to impose to us of what you've felt you got tonight? Marcia.
Yeah, well, when you were talking about getting the best supplies you can get, I remembered years ago when I was taking a class from you and nothing was working. I couldn't do the little techniques that you had taught me. Nothing was working. And you said, "What kind of paper are you using?" And well, it was some real cheap paper that I bought a while back. And oh my gosh, it does make such a difference. I tell you, oh, it makes a huge difference. So I got a good piece of paper and tried the same things, and they all worked.
And you're an award-winning artist.
Thank you.
Every and now I would say, if you don't have the funds for some of these things, that's what you ask your family for Christmas, birthdays, Mother's Day. I want art day. The boys always say I make holidays. So I would say, don't have them buy it for you. You tell them that you will give them an exact, I have a place you can get it, an exact what you want, or say, you know, if you want to give me $20 or $6,000. If you want to give me a little bit of money towards my art fund, I would appreciate it. So, because you don't want them to go out and get the cheap paper you're trying to get rid of. Okay, someone else raise your hand and give me a thought of something that inspired you tonight. Barbara, go ahead.
Well, I just want to say thank you for doing all that you do, because you inspire so many of us artists, number one. And number two, the clarity of your speech. I'm a little hard of hearing, so I really appreciate how clearly that you speak. We all have that time to paint, especially when we look at your life and how busy you are. So again, you inspire us to stop with those silly excuses and get to easels. And last, gratitude and thankfulness for our own personal work. And again, I want to thank you for your constant inspiration to all of us students out there.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And we heard like every fourth word. You're inspired to paint. And here's what I say. I threw out there the busy life I have. And I'm not just an artist. I'm a mom. I'm a grandma. I'm a wife. And we actually do eat. And, you know, I'm very, very active in church and all these other things. But remember on our first talk, we talked about a studio time. A studio time. So tomorrow afternoon is a studio day. And then Friday, I have a couple things in the morning and it's a studio day. And it would be hard to get me out of those because they're important. All right. So Beth and then Kathy. Beth.
Hi, hi. I was interested in your discussion about the, how you said you're into the cruciform sort of composition thing right now. And I was wondering a little bit about your paintings, your abstract kind of paintings, and whether you were getting your ideas from, say, like nature or, how because I think it's it's a field I'm not really very, I've never done anything that's kind of abstract, I guess. So was just curious about it. And I thought it was really interesting about, explaining like the linear painting at Yellowstone and what have you. But I was just curious whether all of your ideas came from some sort of nature thing that you'd seen, or whether. But now I'm seeing you have sort of this cruciform thing, which I think is really interesting.
Go ahead.
No, that's pretty much it.
So that's a really good question. And I would say on our talk that we had a little bit that just kind of gave you a little feeling. In fact, these 3 talks saying, here's what I've learned. And what I've learned is to do the research. So we talked that one time that in the 10 steps, and it could have been 30, 40, 50 steps because I've got all these ideas. But when I do the research, I love creation. I love nature. I love shapes. I love buildings. I love sidewalks. In fact, I love all those things. So as I look farther and farther, the ideas are just massive out there. So, but it wasn't first. So on how you do your brush strokes, how you learn what surfaces you like, it all grows, but it only grows by education that you keep going at positions eventually. Because that really pushes you to go, okay, the checkerboard is new to me. And I went, checkerboard? If you have time at the last, I'll show you the checkerboard painting. But it's really funny because I thought, I don't think I want to do checkerboard. I just did one for fun. And I went, actually, this is kind of cool. So good question. Someone else. Oh, it was Kathy. You need to unmute there. There, you got it. Kathy.
If I talk really slow, will that give you time to go get the checkerboard?
It might. It's still going.
I was on the topic of the compositions also. I liked your idea that you pick a couple styles and work different ways with that. I'm trying to branch out and give a try at abstract, and that's a far stretch from little flowers and all
Yeah, me in Oregon when we were there, they all called me the flower lady, and then I came to Idaho and I went, I can do some. Anyway, I still do the florals, and the last painting I just did is a 48 by, it's on a canvas, 48 by 60 something. It's big, and it's got a piece of a floral and all geometrics in it. And we might even have that as a whole talk about how to talk about process in a painting. I mean, I've got more than 12 topics here, and a lot of these things go on to the subscription as a full lesson. So doing the different compositions, and I started that before we moved here, that's 14 years ago. I think that really changed and challenged me. How many think that they might try some other compositions now?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. Someone else have a comment? I want to keep of your time here. Someone that I haven't talked to. I've never seen a quiet group in any of my art. You're scaring me.
about doing the different compositions. When I look at those examples, I think, oh, that's got to be abstract then. And I'm sure it doesn't, but I see those all as abstract because I start with that form first.
Right. And I'm doing a lot of abstract right now because it's pushing my limits. And I've been getting quite the response from sales and shows from them. So right now I'm in a zone. So that's a little more what you're seeing. But you could, let's say the cruciform. You do a cruciform, and let's say you do a floral. Okay. So maybe across the middle, you have the tulips in a field. They kind of come across. And then maybe you have not in the middle. Remember, it only has to hit 4 sides. Doesn't have to hit the same 4 sides. So on the 2 sides, you can see the tulips go across. And then maybe off to the side, you see a couple trees that come from the tulips in the background that come up and hit the edge. And then down to the bottom, maybe your flower foliage comes down off the edge. I'm talking about a different way of, but it's realism, and maybe it's a little bit abstract, but you can make the pathways in abstract or realism. Realism in some of those, a checkerboard would be realism of, how they're taking all these little real pictures and they're cutting them all up, and then you see the big picture of what it makes. Well, that's a checkerboard, and it becomes realism. So I would say you can, but I think it's easier for some of them to be abstract. So that's a really good point. But I think I'd have to really think, but I don't think there's any of these that you couldn't get into a structure of that. Let's say that it's a frame within a frame, paved, and a bear inside. And you've got a frame within a frame. And it's realism. Checkerboard cruciform mix.
Oh, that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
What are your thoughts?
There's a checkerboard within a checkerboard.
There is. There's the checkerboards. I can move
it.
this up because I'm in a different program than the PowerPoint. I can't do this on the PowerPoint. It's already static.
The
But
color fabulous.
look at that.
Yeah.
This is blue on blue. This is white on blue. I mean, I did a lot of thinking on this, although it looks scattered. There's a lot of thought put to this. But here's my cruciform coming through the circle. And all these are kind of the checkerboard. And then these are checkerboard too.
Love it.
Wow.
It was one that
Yeah.
just, I was just
Great.
playing. And here's another, okay. Those of you that know me, tell me 3 things that you can go, that might be Linda's because she loves
Line.
Circles.
lines, circles,
Circles and lines and
Colors.
contrast.
contrast, and shapes.
Color.
Yes, and shapes and
So-
value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of organic
Now, and texture.
Texture.
Yeah. Definitely.
And texture. All right. We've got a few minutes. Someone else that has a question or a comment about that now that they see we were talking about another composition or thought? Kathy, you've got to understand that was pretty interesting for me to be able to find it that fast.
Yeah, kudos for that.
It's a recent one, so I kind of knew where it lived. I have a lot of folders.
So I have a question.
Okay. Who's saying I?
Beth,
Oh, go ahead.
since someone else is asking I have a question. And this is about supplies. I sometimes struggle with the fact that, you sometimes, you are sometimes, I think, encouraged in various classes or whatever, fill up your wells with paint. Then it dries. Then you go back, you don't really get quite that hue from the paint once it's dried and you're re-wetting it, so to speak. So I wondered if you could just speak to that a little bit. Because I think that's yeah.
I could talk to you about that for a couple hours. Number one of the reasons I use M. Graham paints. A lot of you are familiar with that. Even though Art Graham has retired and everything's going great with the company, I called him a couple of weeks ago and said, "Hi, it's Linda." He goes, "Hi, how you doing?" And I asked very specific questions and very intense questions. Usually when I'm talking about a brush or a paint or a paper, I've gone to the manufacturer and found out what I could. So Beth, here's something I've learned. Number one, we talked about getting that paint out into another container that's a granulating paint,
Yep.
that you're not going to lose it. And you're going to save your colors by keeping them the lids on. By the way, if this is a little comma, acrylic paint can be put back in the tube.
Hmm.
We'll talk about that some. But yeah, you can save your acrylic paint. So I would say there's a couple things. When you put it out in your palette, I would say do not fill up the whole well, because if it gets contaminated, you lose a lot of paint. Generally speaking, you see that on a site that the company that sells the paint is suggesting that. And that's not wrong. It's just it can be a waste. I have at any one time at different locations, I have about 60 pallets I lend in class, 3 different areas. So I'm pretty careful to be sure that I keep the wells not a lot of paint, because a student might make the azo yellow no longer azo. And you could do that too. Graham paint has honey and it's soft. It never gets all the way hard in the container, in the tray. So that you would not want to have it a lot of paint. So number one, I would say if it's a granulating paint, get the tube into containers that are like the lids, so that you save and keep it doesn't dry up in the tube. Then on the paints that you're taking good care of, their caps with the Vaseline around the top so that they come on and off easy. Those can stay in the tube as long as it's not a one that's going to dry up. I like M. Graham first, Daniel Smith next, Holbein after that. Those are my 3 top, and they can all be used together. When you use a paint that is not honey in it, then it's going to dry up. And you've heard this. You've heard, well, just spray. How many have heard spray your paints before you start?
Yeah.
I almost saw Art have a heart attack when I told him, I don't do this. Let me give you a thought. He said these paint companies, him included, work so hard to make this perfect paint, and then you let it sit in water. So you probably want to consider that you would only put the brush in the paints you're working for that day, take the excess water out later so it's not sitting in the paint. And as long as it's a Daniel Smith and other good quality paint, Beth, you're going to be able to get that paint pulled back up into its color that day, because paints will dry or not dry, but you don't want to moisten them as a whole group or spray water. Did that help anybody?
Yeah. Can I ask one other question? So can you mix your M. Graham then with your Daniel Smith or Holbein, even though one's a honey based and the other one's
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can do any mix of any paints. In my world, I say if it's a good paint. If it's Winsor Newton, it says Academy, Grumbacher is Academy. Winsor Newton says Cotman. Those are going back to first grade and your little praying things. So here's what I say about poor quality paint. You can buy a number of tubes of cheap stuff, and you can go through it faster than if you got the good stuff. It is so much pigment and so much in it, you actually save money using good paint, because you're going to get your product down on your paper faster, better, and you're going to have a good product, and you are not going to have a wimpy color or a color that's not going to stay light fast. So I think you're saving money. Buy less of the really good stuff, less colors, learn how to mix some colors, and use good stuff so that your quality of your outcome is better, and then you aren't wasting your time and I think your money when you buy cheap stuff.
Okay. Thank you.
Marsha.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking, I haven't put my paints in the individual little containers, but I just thought of a wonderful reason to do that. I have all my paints in pallets, and like one pallet has so many paints in it. I might want a color from that one, a color from this one. If you have them all individual, you can just pick out the colors you want and have them ready to go. I love that.
You can, and I probably only work out of the containers on the ones, I have a palette that is my main palette. And then the color I don't use very often is over in the other place. So I don't work out of little containers unless it's one that's not in my regular palette. But I have so many colors, I don't want that many palettes. And
Right.
I just want to say that write on it that it's a Daniel Smith or it's a M. Graham. But the idea of working out of those all the time, that would be maybe something you'd have to think about.
Absolutely.
A
Yeah.
palette, make sure that on the palette, you know what's in there, which brand. Every brand is a different recipe. So if it's Daniel Smith ultramarine blue or M. Graham ultramarine blue, they are different recipes and they could work together, but it's not the same color.
Right. And would you explain what you meant by contaminated? I think
Contaminated,
I know, but-
we don't have it as much in Idaho because it's a drier weather, but if you use some paper, I mean, some paint, and I know a person called Linda Aman that did this once. We went out fishing and I used the pond water and to fish with, and I had some mold in one of my paints later on. I know where I got it. But in Idaho, I could probably do that and the mold wouldn't grow. Now, the other way that I've seen people get mold, especially in Oregon, is if you ever use a sponge for your dabber off, or is what I call it, you're using it for your moisture difference or cleaning your brush. A sponge is a mold making machine. I can almost guarantee you will contaminate your paint if you leave a wet sponge in the palette, which just hurts my thought to even say that, or if you use it for dabbing off or changing. So a sponge is an absolute mold making machine.
Material for a palette do you recommend?
Which palette?
Right, correct. Yes.
I don't have it here, and I've used almost every palette there is because I have the opportunity to say that I have to learn these for my artists, you know. So I have a palette. In fact, Mary Artist in Oregon, Merri Artist. If you look them up and you use my code Linda, Linda, capital A for your materials, you'll get a discount. I have a class list there that if you go in the search bar and put class list, you can see the palettes I recommend because they're in Linda Aman's class list. That's probably the best way to see the ones I would say are good ones. Don't get one that's going to be so cheap it picks up on you soon because you want to be able to carry it around and everything. Okay. I had fun. So I hope you did too. Send me some thoughts of how this works for you. Our next topic is going to be how you can assess, think through, just briefly, how you can talk through critiquing your own work. I critique a lot of work, and I'm so blessed to be having people that pay for critiques, personal critiques, they have them in class. And I've made more mistakes than all of you, so I can actually critique pretty well because I've done them all. I've done all the mistakes and all my goodnesses. So we're going to talk next one, February 7th, on a little bit of how to assess your own work. Okay. And then I have a huge list of other topics. You're welcome to send me a thought on a topic. A lot of these topics are already in the 60 lessons that I have, and you can check that out. But I love getting information out there that only takes a lifetime to get. Would you agree with that? My sister-in-law, prize winner, over the top seamstress. In fact, she has boxes of ribbons, and we always tease that I don't have boxes, but she's got boxes of ribbons. But it did not come quickly. It's taking a lifetime that she's done this, and I am the benefit of a lot of her quilts and bags and all kinds of things. But she didn't get that over a short time. She got that over classes, boutiques, work. She's done that just like every profession. So whether you're doing this just for fun or to improve yourself, working hard and learning the next steps is what I'm trying to help you do. So you can unmute so I can hear you all say goodbye.
Hi.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank
Linda.
you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Linda.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.